High Commander Vextalia of the Draconix Empire stared at the holographic display with all four of her crystalline eyes, mandibles twitching in disbelief. The invasion of Earth, classified as a primitive Class 3 world, should have been straightforward. Instead, she watched as another of her supposedly superior warships plummeted through Earth's atmosphere, its hull breached by crude ballistic weapons. Impossible, she chittered, her iridescent scales flickering with agitation. Their technological level was assessed at pre-FTL. They shouldn't have been able to detect our stealth systems, let alone counter them. High Commander, her science officer, Corex, approached with visible trepidation. We've completed our analysis of the human counterattack. It appears they improvised. Vextalia's antenna twitched. Explain. Corex projected a detailed analysis of the recent battle. The humans identified a harmonic frequency in our shield matrix through simple trial and error. Then they modified their primitive projectile weapons to exploit it. They accomplished this in less than 6 hours of combat. Vextalia's scales shifted to a deep purple of concern. The Draconix had spent centuries perfecting their defensive technologies. No species should have been able to adapt so quickly, especially not one that hadn't even established colonies beyond their own moon. Show me the human command center that coordinated this response, she ordered. Corex hesitated. That's another concerning detail, High Commander. There was no central coordination. Individual human military units began developing countermeasures independently. They shared information through their global communication network and simply started copying what worked. The bridge fell silent. Decentralized problem-solving at that scale should have been chaos. Instead, the humans had turned it into an advantage, making their response impossible to predict or counter effectively. High Commander, her tactical officer interrupted. We're detecting launches from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them. The holographic display filled with trajectories of ascending vehicles. Vextalia's defensive instincts screamed to raise shields, but something felt wrong. The launches weren't following attack patterns. Analysis, she demanded. They appear to be civilian vessels, High Commander. The humans are evacuating their coastal cities. Evacuating. Vextalia's confusion deepened. We haven't even begun our orbital bombardment. They have no way of knowing our tactical doctrine. Corex's scales had taken on the white sheen of profound disturbance. High Commander, they don't know our specific plans. They're preparing for every possible scenario simultaneously. Their civilian defense protocols appear to be as adaptable as their military response. A new alert caught Vextalia's attention. The holographic display zoomed in on one of Earth's oceans, where dozens of human naval vessels were rapidly changing position. Tactical analysis of human fleet movements, she ordered. There, High Commander, they're positioning themselves to protect civilian evacuation routes, but also to draw our fire away from population centers. They know they can't win a direct engagement, so they're planning to sacrifice their naval forces to buy time for civilians. Vextalia felt her grasp on reality slipping. The humans weren't following any of the expected patterns for a species at their development level. They should have been paralyzed with fear, their leadership arguing over how to respond. Instead, they were simultaneously developing weapon countermeasures, evacuating civilians, and preparing for extended resistance. Show me their global communication channels, she commanded. The holographic display filled with thousands of information streams. Military commands mixed with civilian broadcasts, emergency alerts, and something called social media. But instead of panic, the overwhelming sentiment was determination. High Commander, Corex's voice had taken on a tone she'd never heard before. I've completed analysis of human historical records. You need to see this immediately. The display shifted to show centuries of human conflicts, technological development, and adaptation to challenges. Natural disasters, wars, plagues. Each time humanity faced an existential threat, they didn't just survive. They emerged stronger. By the first nest, Vextalia whispered, "We didn't find prey. We found predators in hibernation. An alarm blared through the command center. On the tactical display, hundreds of human satellites suddenly changed orbit simultaneously. What looked like debris began moving with purpose. They've weaponized their orbital junk, the tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking rapidly. They're using it to create kill boxes in our approach vectors. Vextalia watched as her carefully planned invasion fell apart. The humans weren't fighting according to any recognizable doctrine. They were changing strategies on the fly, using everything at their disposal, from advanced ballistics to space debris, as weapons. High Commander, Correx approached again, their scales now completely white. I've projected the likely outcomes if we continue this invasion. The humans, they won't stop. Even if we destroy their military assets, they'll keep fighting. They have something called guerrilla warfare. They'll turn their cities into fortresses, their civilians into soldiers. They'll study our every weakness, adapt to our every strategy, and they'll teach each other how to kill us. Vextalia stared at the blue-green planet below. In all her centuries of military service, she'd never encountered a species like this. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were learning from every engagement, getting stronger with every passing moment. Send the signal, she finally ordered. All ships are to withdraw to minimum safe distance, and prepare my direct communication channel to the Imperial Council. What will you tell them, High Commander? Vextalia watched as another of her ships struggled against the improvised human orbital defenses. I will tell them we've made a terrible mistake. We assumed that any species that hadn't spread beyond their own solar system must be primitive. She gestured at the tactical display, showing the increasingly sophisticated human countermeasures. We were wrong. They haven't spread out because they're still perfecting their killing techniques. As the Draconix fleet began its withdrawal, Vextalia made a final note in her command log. The humans are not prey hiding on a primitive world. They are apex predators patiently waiting in their nest, and we just woke them up. Senior synapsepsychologist Niraval paced the sterile confines of her research station, all three hearts beating erratically as she prepared to deliver her findings to the Imperial Council. The holographic data streams surrounding her workstation painted her scaled skin in an eerie blue glow. Begin recording, she commanded, her voice trembling slightly. Comprehensive psychological assessment of species designation. Human. Classification. Urgent. Security level. Maximum. She gestured at the floating displays, bringing forward weeks of observational data. Following the failed invasion attempt of Sol 3, I was tasked with understanding the psychological makeup of humanity. After extensive study, I must report that these creatures are impossible. The displays filled with footage of human activities across their planet. Humans exhibit behavioral patterns that defy our established models of species development. They are simultaneously the most cooperative and most competitive species we've encountered. They will fight to the death over trivial differences, yet unite instantly against external threats. She pulled up footage from their first contact attempt. During the initial invasion, we observed humans who had been actively fighting each other immediately coordinate defense efforts. Their capacity to shift from internal conflict to unified action is unprecedented. Niraval's scales shifted to a troubled gray as she accessed the next set of data. But their contradictions go deeper. Humans routinely risk their lives to save complete strangers, yet they're capable of calculated violence that would disturb even our military specialists. They create art celebrating peace while perpetually preparing for war. They're driven by emotion, yet capable of cold, methodical planning. The displays showed scenes from human entertainment, stories of both horrific violence and profound sacrifice. Their imagination is perhaps their most disturbing quality. Humans don't just plan for actual threats, they invent possible threats. They create fictional scenarios of their own extinction and then develop strategies to prevent them. When our invasion began, many humans reported feeling prepared because they had already imagined similar scenarios in their entertainment. She brought up neural scan data. Their brains are constantly active, even during rest periods. They experience something called dreams, involuntary mental simulations that often involve solving problems or confronting dangers. They are, in essence, training even while unconscious. The next series of images showed human children. Their young are particularly concerning. While most species protect their offspring from danger, humans deliberately expose their children to controlled challenges. They create games that simulate combat, puzzle solving, and survival scenarios. They're literally programming their young to become more effective predators while maintaining the guise of play. Nairaval paused, collecting herself before continuing. Most disturbing is their response to failure. When humans fail at something, they don't just try again. They innovate. Each failure is treated as a learning opportunity. During our invasion, we observed humans celebrating their early defeats because of the tactical data they gained. She pulled up psychological profiles of human military personnel. Their warriors display a quality they call gallows humor, the ability to find amusement in potentially fatal situations. This appears to be a psychological adaptation that allows them to function under conditions that would break most sentient species. The display shifted to show human medical facilities. Even their approach to death defies conventional logic. When told they have terminal conditions, many humans don't accept their fate. They fight it. They volunteer for experimental treatments, seeking not just to survive, but to help future generations survive similar conditions. They turn their own mortality into a weapon against death itself. Nairaval's scales had shifted to the deep purple of profound disturbance. Their information-sharing capabilities compound all these traits. Humans constantly communicate, learning from each other's successes and failures. When one human develops an effective strategy, it can spread globally within hours. They call this going viral, an apt description for how their ideas infect and multiply. She brought up final analysis charts. In conclusion, I must recommend that the Imperial Council immediately classify humans as a Class 1 psychological hazard. They are not simply dangerous because of their adaptability or resourcefulness. They are dangerous because they can conceive of possibilities that our species would never imagine, then turn those possibilities into reality. The display showed scenes of human scientific achievements, from splitting the atom to space exploration. These beings went from powered flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 solar cycles. They did this not because they had to, but because they imagined they could. Their imagination, combined with their determination and adaptability, makes them unlike anything we've encountered. Nairaval's voice took on an urgent tone. Most critically, we must understand that our invasion attempt may have catastrophic long-term consequences. Humans now know they're not alone in the universe. They know there are hostile species out there. And if there's one thing our psychological analysis has shown, it's that humans never forget a potential threat. She pulled up the final data set. Human military research and development spending since the invasion attempt. The numbers were climbing exponentially. They're not just preparing to defend themselves. She concluded, her scales now almost white with fear. They're preparing to take the fight to the stars. And based on their psychological profile, they won't stop until they're certain they can face any threat the galaxy might pose. End recording, she whispered, staring at the final display showing human space program developments. May the first nest have mercy on us all. We didn't just wake them up. We gave them a purpose. Research Station Chief Rathax reviewed the emergency alert from Earth Observation Post 7 with mounting horror. His sensory tendrils coiled tightly against his carapace as he read the report again, convinced there must be some error in the translation. Verify this data immediately, he ordered the observation team. These readings can't be correct. Lead observer Mel Canny brought up the live feed from their hidden sensors. The data is accurate, Chief. We're observing hundreds of humans deliberately subjecting themselves to physical stress and resistance training. This facility they call a gym appears to be some sort of voluntary torture chamber. The screen showed humans lifting heavy weights, running on machines that went nowhere and contorting their bodies in ways that made Rothax's exoskeleton cringe. But most disturbing was their facial expressions. They appeared to be enjoying it. "Explain," Rothax demanded, his scientific curiosity warring with his instinctive revulsion. Melkani's analysis tentacles writhed as she compiled the data. Humans have developed a cultural practice they call working out. They deliberately damage their muscle fibers through repetitive stress, knowing their bodies will repair the damage and become stronger. They do this systematically, following programs designed to maximize physical adaptation. The feed switched to something called a CrossFit competition. Rothax watched in disbelief as humans pushed themselves to the point of physical exhaustion, cheered on by their peers. "This can't be natural behavior," he chittered. "Some sort of mind control must be involved." "Negative," Melkani responded. "They do this voluntarily. In fact, they pay currency for the privilege of accessing these facilities. Some humans wake up before their solar cycle begins just to engage in these activities." Rethax's confusion deepened as the feed showed more varieties of human exercise: swimming against artificial currents, climbing walls with artificial handholds, lifting objects only to put them down again. But what's the evolutionary advantage? He wondered aloud. Most species only exert themselves when necessary for survival. Melkani brought up additional data streams. "It gets worse, Chief. Humans don't just exercise for strength. They have something called endurance training. They run enormous distances, not because they're being chased, but to improve their capacity to run even further." The screens filled with images of human marathon runners, ultra athletes, and endurance events. Rethax watched in growing dismay as humans pushed themselves through desert heat, Arctic cold, and everything in between. "Observe this event called Iron Man," Melkani continued. "Humans swim 3.86 kilometers, then immediately cycle 180.25 kilometers, followed by running 42.20 kilometers. They call this recreation." Recreation. Rethax's color patterns shifted to express deep existential concern. "They do this for entertainment." Affirmative. "And this is considered an entry-level event for some humans. There are more extreme challenges." She brought up footage of something called ultra-marathons and Arctic survival challenges. Rethax's scientific mind struggled to process the implications. "Are you saying that humans deliberately subject themselves to near-death experiences to become harder to kill?" "Precisely," Melkani confirmed. "They have entire industries dedicated to pushing the limits of human endurance. They study the results, refine their methods, and then push even further." The feed switched to a military training exercise. Their warriors take this to another level entirely. Look at their special forces training programs. Rethax watched as human military units subjected themselves to sleep deprivation, extreme temperatures, and simulated combat conditions. They're systematically identifying and eliminating every physical weakness, he realized aloud. "It's not just their warriors," Melkani added. "We've observed elderly humans engaging in resistance training to slow the effects of aging. Their young practice sports that combine complex tactical thinking with physical excellence. Even their recreational activities often involve challenging themselves physically." Rethax's science team had brought more disturbing data. Humans were developing technologies to track their physical performance, competing with themselves and others through interconnected networks. They were gamifying their own evolution. "Update the threat assessment," Rothax ordered, his voice trembling. "Any species that treats physical hardship as a hobby is capable of anything. And add this to the psychological profile. Humans don't just adapt to survive. They actively seek out ways to become more formidable." The screen showed more humans entering the gym as their workday ended. Rethax watched them choose to make themselves stronger, faster, more resilient, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "One final observation, Chief," Melkani added. "Since our failed invasion attempt, Registration at these facilities has increased by 47%. They're not just exercising anymore, they're preparing. Rethink stared at the endless stream of humans voluntarily pushing their bodies to the limit. We thought their physical capabilities were near their peak, he said quietly. But they're just getting started, aren't they? Affirmative. Mel Kenny confirmed. And Chief, they have a saying in their exercise facilities. No pain, no gain. They've turned suffering itself into a tool for improvement. Rethax activated the emergency channel to Imperial Command. Some things were too important to delay. The Empire needed to understand. They hadn't just awakened a sleeping predator. They'd awakened a species that treated adversity as an opportunity for growth. The humans weren't just surviving. They were actively evolving, one rep at a time. Ambassador Tilura's diplomatic membrane pulsed with anxiety as she prepared for her first official meeting with human representatives. After the failed invasion and subsequent disturbing reports about human nature, the Empire had decided to attempt peaceful contact. She had spent months studying human diplomatic protocols, yet still felt woefully unprepared. The human delegation has arrived, her assistant, Vinrex, announced. But Ambassador, there seems to be an irregularity. Explain, Tilera demanded, her scales shifting to a concerned yellow. They've sent a mixed delegation, military officers, scientists, and civilian leaders. According to our protocols, this is highly irregular. Different castes shouldn't mix during initial diplomatic contact. Tilera reviewed the human delegation's credentials on her datapad. Indeed, they had sent an Air Force general, a theoretical physicist, a cultural anthropologist, and what they called a diplomatic troubleshooter. Most concerning was that they all appeared to have equal standing. Perhaps they don't understand proper protocol, she suggested hopefully. The meeting began cordially enough. The humans had studied alien physiology sufficiently to avoid triggering any instinctive threat responses. But as discussions progressed, Tilera found herself increasingly bewildered by their approach to negotiations. Let me understand, she said carefully, her translator working overtime to convey the proper tone. You want to establish not just peaceful relations, but cultural and scientific exchange programs. Correct, the human physicist, Dr. Sarah Chen, responded with what Tilera had learned was called enthusiasm. We believe there's enormous potential for mutual benefit, even though we attempted to invade your world. Tilera's confusion was evident in her color patterns. The general, James Martinez, actually smiled, a human expression that still unsettled Tilera despite her training. That's exactly why this is important. We want to understand you better, and we want you to understand us. To prevent future conflicts, Tilera nodded. This made sense. Not just that, the anthropologist, Dr. Marcus Williams, interjected. We want to learn from each other. Your technology, our adaptability. Your social stability, our innovation. Think of the possibilities. Tilera's diplomatic membrane nearly ruptured from shock. You want to combine our strengths, but we're your former enemies. The diplomatic troubleshooter, Diana Patel, leaned forward. Ambassador, humans have a long history of turning enemies into allies. Some of our strongest partnerships emerged from former conflicts. We learn from each other. Vinrex's data tendrils curled in distress as he processed this information. You're suggesting that conflict can lead to cooperation. Exactly, General Martinez confirmed. Look at human history. Germany and Japan were our enemies in World War II. Now they're among our closest allies. We fought a devastating civil war among ourselves, yet reunited stronger than before. Tilera's scales shifted through several colors of confusion. You view conflict as a potential pathway to understanding. Sometimes, Dr. Chen explained, we prefer peaceful first contact, obviously. But now that we know about each other, we have two choices: remain suspicious enemies, or work to build something better. The anthropologist added, your invasion attempt taught us we're not alone in the universe. That's actually exciting for many humans. We want to explore, to learn, to grow. Even though we tried to conquer you, Tilera still couldn't process this logic. Water under the bridge, Diana smiled, using an idiom that made Tilera's translator stutter. Besides, you gave us something invaluable: unity. Humanity had never been more unified than when we faced your invasion. We'd like to maintain that unity through peaceful cooperation rather than threat of war. Tilera's diplomatic training had never prepared her for this. The humans were treating a failed invasion as a networking opportunity. They were proposing joint scientific ventures, cultural exchanges, and military cooperation agreements, all while casually referencing the recent conflict as a learning experience. "I must ask," she finally said, "aren't you afraid we might use this cooperation to gather intelligence for future military actions?" The general's response chilled her core temperature by several degrees. "Ambassador, we're counting on you gathering intelligence about us. The more you understand humans, the less likely you are to make the mistake of underestimating us again." Dr. Chen quickly added, "Besides, knowledge exchange goes both ways. We learn about you, you learn about us. Mutual understanding leads to mutual respect. And if we betray that respect?" Vinrex asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Diana's smile remained diplomatic, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Then you'll be dealing with humans who understand your capabilities and have had time to prepare. We prefer friends, but we excel at handling enemies." Tilera finally understood. The humans weren't being naive. They were being strategic. Every aspect of this diplomatic initiative served multiple purposes. They were offering genuine cooperation while simultaneously establishing deterrence. "I begin to understand why the psychological assessment rated your species as highly complex," she admitted. "Oh, that's nothing," Dr. Williams laughed. "Wait until we introduce you to human sports. We turn literally everything into a competition, even cooperation." Tilera's diplomatic membrane pulsed with resignation as she prepared her report to the Imperial Council. How could she explain that humans had somehow transformed a failed invasion into a diplomatic opportunity? That they were eager to learn from the very species that had tried to conquer them? Most importantly, how could she convey that their offer of friendship might be more dangerous than their enmity? Because a species that could turn enemies into allies, that treated conflict as a path to understanding, and that viewed every interaction as a chance to grow stronger. That was a species that would never stop evolving. The humans weren't just offering peace, they were offering to teach the Empire how to be more like them. And that, Tilera realized, was either the most brilliant or terrifying diplomatic strategy she had ever encountered. Grand Strategist Zixtal stood before the Imperial Council, his presentation crystals hovering around him as he delivered what might be the most important analysis of his career. "Esteemed council members," he began, "after reviewing all data regarding human capabilities, I must recommend an unprecedented course of action. We should not merely seek peace with humans, we should actively pursue alliance with them." The council chamber erupted in chittering protests. High Counselor Vectora raised her primary appendage for silence. "Explain your reasoning, strategist. Why should we ally with a species that repelled our invasion?" "Precisely because they repelled our invasion," Zixtal responded, activating his first data crystal. "Observe the human response to our attempted conquest. In just 6 standard months since our withdrawal, they have." The holographic display filled with statistics advanced their space defense capabilities by an estimated 30 solar cycles, developed countermeasures to our supposedly superior technology, united their previously fractured political systems into a coherent defensive alliance, and most importantly, they'd done all this while simultaneously attempting peaceful diplomatic contact. A second crystal activated, showing human technological advancement rates. But what truly demands our attention is their pattern of development. Humans don't just solve problems, they innovate beyond the immediate need. When they develop a solution, they immediately begin improving it, even without an active threat. You speak of their technological capabilities. Council member Kravex interrupted. But what of their primitive social structure? Zixtal's third crystal revealed footage from human cities. What we initially mistook for primitive chaos is actually a form of distributed resilience. Humans thrive on diversity of thought and approach. Their lack of unified control isn't a weakness. It's a source of strength. They generate more solutions because they try more approaches simultaneously. The fourth crystal displayed military analysis. Consider their combat doctrine. Humans don't just fight with technology or numbers. They adapt constantly, using everything from advanced physics to primitive physical combat. Their special forces teams train to operate with or without technology. They plan for every contingency, including scenarios we would consider impossible. And this makes them suitable allies. Vectora asked skeptically. Yes, Zixtal insisted, because humans understand something we don't. True strength comes from complementary capabilities. He activated his final crystal, showing the results of his strategic simulations. In every scenario where we face a major external threat, an alliance with humanity significantly improves our survival probability. The display shifted to show human responses to various crises. They approach problems differently than we do. Where we seek perfect solutions, they embrace good enough for now and improve iteratively. Where we rely on established protocols, they innovate on the fly. They turn our weaknesses into opportunities and our differences into advantages. But can they be trusted? Kravex demanded. Their history is full of conflict. Their history of conflict is precisely why they can be trusted, Zixtal countered. Humans understand warfare so intimately that they prefer to avoid it. They know the cost of conflict and value peace, but they never forget how to fight. They maintain readiness even in peacetime, not because they want war, but because they understand deterrence. He brought up footage from human diplomatic meetings. Moreover, they demonstrated remarkable capacity for alliance building. Former enemies become partners, sharing knowledge and resources. They understand that diverse perspectives strengthen rather than weaken a coalition. What of the risk? Vectora pressed. If we share our technology, they could eventually surpass us. Zixtal's color patterns shifted to indicate certainty. Honored Council, they will surpass us regardless. The only question is whether we want them as allies when they do. Already, they've taken our invasion attempt and turned it into a catalyst for advancement. They're not angry. They're grateful for the wake-up call. The chamber fell silent as Zixtal projected his final analysis. We have three options. First, we could attempt another invasion, which my simulations show would fail catastrophically. Second, we could isolate ourselves from them, which would leave us vulnerable to other threats while humans continue to advance. Or third, we could ally with them, combining their adaptability with our experience, their innovation with our stability. And if they betray us? Kravex asked. Then we'll have had the opportunity to learn their strengths firsthand, Zixtal responded. But my analysis suggests they'll be loyal allies precisely because we once were enemies. Humans have a saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. They believe understanding former adversaries is crucial to maintaining peace. Vectora's color patterns showed deep thought. You believe they could help us face the Void Swarm. I believe, Zixtal said carefully, that humans would look at our millennium-long stalemate with the Void Swarm and see not an eternal deadlock, but a challenge to overcome. They would bring new perspectives, unconventional solutions, and most importantly, their relentless drive to improve. He displayed a final simulation showing combined human imperial forces facing various threats. We've spent centuries perfecting our current strategies. Humans would help us develop new ones. They would challenge our assumptions, force us to adapt, and make us stronger in the process. The council chamber remained silent for several moments before Vectora spoke. You're suggesting we not only ally with them, but allow them to change us. Honored Council, Zixtal concluded, change is inevitable. Humans have shown us that resistance to change is futility. They've turned adaptation itself into a strength. We can either resist their influence and become obsolete, or embrace their methods and evolve. The question isn't whether the galaxy will change, it's whether we want to help guide that change or be overtaken by it. As the council deliberated, Zixtal watched his simulations play out. In every scenario where humans and the Empire worked together, both species thrived. Because humans didn't just overcome challenges, they transformed them into opportunities. They didn't just survive threats, they learned from them. And perhaps most importantly, they didn't just make peace with former enemies, they'd made them stronger in the process. The Empire had sought to make humans their subjects. Instead, they found themselves becoming humanity's students, and in that role reversal lay the greatest lesson of all. True strength comes not from dominating others, but from learning from them. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Zixtal realized, was exactly what made humans the perfect allies for facing an ever-changing universe.